Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to one of the series of the National Council's briefings on Capitol Hill. Mission is an educational one. Vision is to place this relationship on a firmer foundation than it has been, than it is, and is likely to be, unless enough good people on both sides work to make it happen. We know it won't happen by accident or by coincidence. It'll happen only if there are enough good people on both sides of conviction, of determination, and the courage of their convictions to commit themselves to this particular vision and this particular mission. And so this is fully in keeping with the mission as well as the vision. Fewer countries in the world, not just among the Arab countries, the Middle East, and the Islamic world, are as poorly known or misunderstood as is Qatar. 20 years ago, some who are here in the audience, Ambassador Session, for example, Ambassador Cook, Ambassador Theros, can remember that when diplomats were going to the region and they got a call from Washington to come back quickly, the one country they always counseled was Qatar, without exception. It was the one that seemed to be the most marginal, the least important, the most expendable. And that was the case for years throughout the 1970s. Also, people used to make jokes about the empty quarter and the empty Qatar there. And then others were not certain whether Qatar was animal, vegetable, or mineral. Fortunately, all of those images of this small but outsized country that packs a global wallet, like Liechtenstein in its own way, or Switzerland in another way, is increasingly a household word, including the city. The new city center development, a mixed commercial residential project, it's visionary in the heart of the nation's capital, has some $650 million investment by Qatar, by far more than any other country. In terms of the victims of the disaster in Katrina, no Arab country contributed more in terms of charity and humanitarian and emergency relief assistance than Qatar, and no country did it in quite the same way. It did not go through the municipality of New Orleans. It did not go through the governor of Louisiana, where perhaps administrative fees would have been skimmed off the top. It went directly, mubashir, out to the recipients themselves. And Qatar had done the same thing in the disaster of Beirut during the month-long Israeli bombing of Lebanon in July of 2006. So we have a unique pioneering country that many of you want to know more about or have some of its aspects explained. No doubt some of these aspects are controversial, not least of which would be the Al Jazeera television satellite broadcast network that reaches throughout the region and has drawn not as many critics or opponents as its supporters and appreciated listeners and viewers, but it certainly has drawn a lot of animosity from those who have felt unjustly targeted or reported on or referred to. That's just one aspect of it. Qatar sits right in the middle of the six-state Gulf Cooperation Council. It has vast gas resources, the third on the planet, and the only one that has a vast unassociated gas field. As most people know, you don't have to be an engineer to know this, that most petroleum that's produced is produced alongside gas. And in the past, it used to be flared at the wellhead, hence these orange bursts that one would see from the sky, which rendered the gas unusable to industrial or commercial use. Not Qatar, not Kuwait, not Abu Dhabi, not Saudi Arabia anymore. And so the future, near-term, mid-term, long-term of the increasing industrialization of the six GCC countries would be strategically well served through Qatar's strategic geographic position in its economic as well as its geological and hydrocarbon fuels wherewithal. Now, our ambassador, who will be a resource person for us to increase our knowledge and understanding and enhance our information and insight about this country, is His Excellency Mohammed Jaham Al Kuwari. This is his 31st year of being a diplomat. That's almost a generation, if a generation is measured in terms of 33 years. He attended Portland State University on a scholarship and obtained his degree in political science. He's most recently been for 10 years Qatar's ambassador to France. And for old-timers, people are aware that France had a privileged, a special relationship with Qatar. The atmosphere was always receptive in France. The moment was always propitious in France for a close, intimate, strategic working partnership between Paris and Doha. There's that aspect of it as well. Qatar is in a difficult situation now in terms of how it's perceived, how it's understood, and how it's misunderstood. But we have the ambassador who was awarded France's Legion of Honor, France's highest reward for excellence. He was accredited to Spain and Portugal, as well as the Holy See and Switzerland during his tenure in France. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Ambassador Al Kuwari.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John. Old friend. I have known him for almost now 31 years, when the first time I came to Washington. And I am very happy to see a lot of friends here also that I worked with them. Really, everybody talk about Qatar wasn't known, and Qatar was geographically small size, and which we admit. We know that Qatar is small geographically, but we know our limit, geographical limit, but we do not know our limit for contribution for humanity. And this is the most important thing for Qatar. Thank you, John, for making me work the last week 3 times. Since this is the third event with you, I am so glad and really appreciate working with your council. I would like to say just my thanks to the National Council and U.S.-Arab Relations for the invitation to speak with you today. I like also the title you put, John, Qatar Understood and Misunderstood. We live in an age where information is ubiquitous, instant, and accessible. The internet is a vast, borderless network, and it is said that getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. And as Carl Sagan said, all the books in the world contain no more information than is broadcast as video in a single large American city in a single year. We have so many contemporary vehicles for communication and free speech, but it does not preclude the potential for mispresentation and misunderstandings. Not all information is of equal value. There are 2 types of understanding: contrived and uninformed. If there are those who misunderstand Qatar deliberately, then it is a position of or policy with motive not to understand. We seek to correct contrived misunderstandings and hope that those who deliberately misunderstand are open to dialogue. But if it is an uninformed misunderstanding, then in general, Qatar is an open society, appreciative of scrutiny and ready to inform. And if we are to be understood today, then we must be assessed by context of both our international role and regional dynamics, as well as for our efforts to be defined by a mission. Qatar, despite its small geographical size and limited population, have been able to, like what John explained, mobilize its enormous liquefied natural gas resources towards the development of physical and institutional infrastructure. The continual investment in the improvement of education and reinvestment into a diversified, self-sustaining economy. All this we do not only for our citizens and residents, but for the promotion of sustainable development within our Arab national constituency. To this end, we share the same ideals that the United States has enshrined in its foundational narrative of human rights, freedom and of expression, equal opportunities, and the democratic process. Our projects and initiatives are geared towards the empowerment of women, youth development, poverty alleviation, and institution building in the global south. Our humanitarian and relief efforts amount to around 7% of the annual budget of the state of Qatar, nearly $1 billion in a government and non-government aid. In order to encourage a society that embraces modernism, we have invited to Doha the world's most famous Western and Oriental symphonic orchestras, built a museum for a contemporary art, held the Doha Tribeca Film Festival, and convene a wide array of conferences, seminars, and dialogue regarding critical global challenges. And next conference will be Doha Forum in May 12th. We believe that strong, credible higher education institutions are able to forge ties between countries and cultures, overcome entrenched stereotypes and misperceptions, and inculcate each new generation with progressive democratic values. Pursuant of that belief, we have built an education city that brings together branches of leading American university. We have 6 big American universities like Georgetown and Texas University and Cornell and others, that each not only Qatari students reach Qatari students, but the greater Middle East region. In regards to independent media, Al Jazeera has remained since its inception in 1969. I'm sorry, I'm mixing French a little bit, but a credible force behind free expression. It has provided a broad audience with what it is motto, the view and the other point of view. Give opposition groups a platform to express their views regardless of government pressure, and has emerged as a brand that is universally recognizable. In terms of relation with our regional neighbors, our 2003 Constitution established mediation as a cornerstone to its foreign policy, and we have had a fair share of opportunities to mediate in Yemen, Darfur, as well as Eritrea and Djibouti. In fact, as a member of a number of regional and international organizations for the promotion of economic and transitional cooperation in the Middle East. For example, we are a member of GCC, the Arab League, and the United Nations. We view foreign policy as a tool to resolve ethnic, tribal, and sectarian differences. Along that line, Qatar has hosted several reconciliations meetings between Palestinians, brought together Syrian opposition forces in late 2012 in order to better coordinate their resistance against the Assad regime, and intervene in an 18-month deadlock between political parties in Lebanon. Politically stable in a turbulent regime, the role we play is vital for the United States and the West, because Qatar is the door to countries and political parties that would be otherwise inaccessible. Lastly, we have built a strong and productive U.S.-Qatar economic relationship, and we have chosen to make the United States a hub for our economic investments. Under the National Vision 2030, we intend to follow a framework for knowledge-based economy, diversifying our economy so that non-hydrocarbon sectors will account for no more than half of Qatar's GDP by the end of 2015. In lieu of hosting the 2022 FIFA World Cup, we intend to spend up to $200 billion on infrastructure that will have long-term benefits for both Qatar and our American partners. Among these new projects, we have the construction of a new Hamad International Airport, the expansion of Qatar Airways and Qatar Rail, the new Doha Port, the state-of-art science and technology park, education city, a new investment in our ICT infrastructure, and finally, the expansion of the healthcare sector. Globalization is oftentimes followed by assimilation of pre-existing cultures, but safeguarding traditional values and identity remains a crucial factor in preserving a coherent national narrative. It is a privilege to be able to present Qatar here for you so that we may have a sound mutual understanding of our two nations, and I hope that we maintain this relation going forward. And thank you for being here. Stay here or?
Sure, that's good. We should have left on your chairs, the seats thereof, 3x5 cards for you to write a question, not a statement, and for the question to be rhetorical, not declaratory, and a question that begins with how cannot be answered yes or no, so that gives you a little clue if you were wondering how to phrase your question. Some of these questions will be controversial, as is the nature of the reality.
We are ready to Qatar understand.
All right. So Patrick Manzino will join me here because there are more questions than for which we have time. But I'll try to ask the more controversial ones and others that are less well known but would increase their knowledge and understanding. Number one, how is Qatar's support of the Muslim Brotherhood in the region's best interest, given the ongoing turmoil across the Arab world?
Well, thank you for asking this question.
Very diplomatic.
This is one of the things we have to clarify. This is one of Qatar does not support Muslim Brothers. This is something I think we have to say it. I'm saying it here in the Congress, in American Congress. What Qatar supported is the democratic process and political process in Egypt. And then there was election, and there was president was elected, so we have to respect this thing. So Qatar has no whatsoever relation with Muslim Brothers. Muslim Brothers being in in Egypt for a long time. They are uprooted in the Egyptian society. They are being in Egypt over 70, 80 years, even before Qatar's independence in 71. So, and they don't need support from Qatar. They are big organization, intellectuals. They are everywhere in Egypt and other countries in the region. So what we supported in Egypt is the democratic and political process. And there was election, there was a president was elected. We regret that this elected president was removed by coup d'etat. And this is our position, has nothing to do with the Muslim Brothers. We know that President Morsi committed probably major errors while he was president, but we see this is a sinful errors from other side to remove an elected president. So this thing, I think we should clarify our position. Muslim Brothers, they are intellectual and political force in Egypt. They don't need support from Qatar. We are only for the democratic process in our region. We have to introduce this culture. We need to really work for democracy in our region. This democracy, through democracy, we can combat the terrorism. We can fight against these fundamentalists. If we do not respect the democratic process, then we have a problem in our region. So this is our position toward Muslim Brothers.
Okay. Related to that, Egypt had two revolutions and coups, while Qatar had peaceful transfer of power without elections. Why does Qatar support democracy in other countries without applying it to itself?
First of all, we don't say that we are a democratic country, not yet, because we are in the region, which is a lot of evolution, democratic evolution in our region. We are trying to take some steps toward democracy. We have a constitution which is giving women rights to be to vote, to be elected. We have expression, freedom of expression in our country. We have free press. We are trying to promote the democracy in our country in a way not to create any difficulties for our path toward democracy. But we know in our region, if there is democracy, we are a small country, like what we mentioned in the beginning of our, we need this stability. Through democracy, we can have a lot of stabilities in our region. And Qatar is taking a lot of steps toward democracy. We don't have any problem discussing any issue in Qatar. This is something very important. We are making everybody in Qatar is sharing the decision we've been taking in our country, and I think these kind of steps are necessary comparing of what's going on in our region.
All right. How can you explain the image of Qatar being portrayed as against secularism or liberalism in Egypt, as represented, comparatively speaking, by the coup, if you want to call it that, led by General Sisi, and the widespread, pervasive repression of the leadership of the Muslim Brothers and hundreds of its supporters and members?
Well, we believe in Qatar that we have to be open to everybody, liberal, secular, moderate, Muslims. I think we have to speak to everybody. As long as all these political forces are believing on political and democratic process, I think Qatar is open to speak with anybody. And we have to realize that any Islamic movement that they accept certain principle of democracy, like election and sit with a liberal, with a woman role, and respect the minority in our region. So all these criteria, I think we can work together, we can promote our region together, but Qatar is open to everybody, to the seculars, to the liberal, to the most moderate Islamic movement. So we cannot really mix all these, the extremists with the moderates together. I think we have to build up a wall between extremism and moderation. And this is the future of our region.
How would you explain the long-standing criticism of Qatar since the onset of Al Jazeera, that it is free almost without limits to discuss issues controversial and timely and relevant regarding other countries, other governments, their policies and positions, actions and attitudes, but seldom or to a very small degree do the same with regard to Qatar's own policies, positions, actions and attitude towards issues of consequence.
I think, to be fair enough, we have to go and check all these programs in Al Jazeera. You will find there are some criticism of Qatar. They are talking about Qatar foreign policy. When it is important and necessary, Qatar is a small country. They are not sometimes a lot of things to talk about it, like what's going on in Egypt or in Syria or in other big Arab countries. But as you remember, Qatar, they was criticized in Al Jazeera that they have good relation with the United States, they have connection with Israel, they are inviting a lot of religious leaders for like Jewish, Christian to meet in Qatar. So everybody is talking about this in Al Jazeera, and we have to let Al Jazeera be free and to choose any subject they want. They want Qatar, want to discuss any issue, any things about Qatar, they are free. We have no difficulties, we have no problems with anybody criticizing Qatar. Because sometimes criticizing Qatar for us, it is positive. We learn something. We introduce some reforms in our country when we see that somebody is criticizing, and then we look, is it true or not? Should we change this or not? So criticizing Qatar, for us, it is not sensitive. It is, we appreciate anyone having anything about Qatar to say it freely in Al Jazeera. We have no problem about this.
All right. In a little bit, there will be 4 or 5 questions about the domestic situation in Qatar, so I'm giving you a heads up. The next one has to do with Syria. What is the main Qatari goal in the Syrian crisis? What is Doha's strategy in it or towards it? And what do you envision for Qatar's role in the future of Syria, especially if the regime falls?
First of all, as you know, we had good relation with Bashar al-Assad before the crisis in Syria and Daraa. We helped a lot. To present Bashar to the international community. We helped them. We invested in Syria. We had an excellent relation. So when the crisis started, we tried to help also in the beginning in Daraa. We told them, we have to work together. We have to look at this thing seriously. This is it's not hard to solve this problem, but you have to take some steps. So then the problem started killing people in the street. Then for Qatar it was very difficult to take this position with Bashar. And we said, this is, we have to be beside the Syrian people. So this is the position of Qatar in the beginning. And we think now the position, we have to help them. We have to work for the future of Syria, and Qatar will continue playing positive role to see Syria unified and to protect the sovereignty of Syria. And the future of Syria is everybody should be integrated in this future Syria. The Alawi, the Christians, the Maruna, the Druze, the Sunni, the Shiites, everybody has, and the Kurds, of course, everybody has the right to be part of the future Syria. And this is what we are working for. And Qatar will continue helping Syrian people.
I'll turn to my colleague, Patrick Mancino, the National Council's Executive Vice President and Director of Development.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. For the sake of time here, I'm going to combine the question regarding Iran into one. How will Iran benefit from current GCC tensions? And on that, in the same spirit here, do you believe that Iran is turning a new page in its relations with the world, or, as this writer describes, are they just buying time?
First of all, I don't think anybody in the region is benefiting from the tension in the region. Neither Iran nor the GCC countries. I think all of us, we have to work together. And hopefully that the latest development happen in the GCC country should be limited. And we have to think that anything happen to any of GCC countries, all the GCC countries will be affected. And Iran, I don't think they are looking for any tension in the region. They are our neighbors, and we're always looking for a good relation with Iran through dialogue. And I think we should continue. And we have to work together in our region because we went through a lot of wars. I think it's enough. We should sit together and talk to each other and have hope for the future. And I think the possibility is very important in this domain. And I served in Iran before as a diplomat for 2 years. I know the willingness of Iranian people to live in peace and have stability in the region, and I think we have to work with that. Regarding the second part, which is about if Iran is playing with time or something.
Is Iran just buying time, or are they actually turning a new page in its relations with the world?
You know, I think about the negotiation now going on between the United States and Iran, it is very important. It's a very important step. We have to encourage this thing, and we think Iran is very serious, and the United States is very serious also, and the GCC country, they want to see this cooperation is leading to really larger cooperation between us in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Again, for the sake of time and trying to get to these questions, which are wonderful, I'm going to thread these three together. This one is from someone whose family lives in Gaza, and he says, Qatar has taken undue and unfair criticism for providing relief to my home in Gaza. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and the Emir and Sheikh Tamim. Do you see a change in that in the near future? So this is related to Gaza. Second question, how can the Palestinian refugee issue be resolved? And these are the easy questions. How long do we have before a two-state solution in Palestine and Israel becomes impossible?
Well, regarding the first question about Gaza, we believe in Qatar that if we are going to work for the peace in the region, we have to prepare the ground. We have to have a very solid foundation for economic cooperation in the region. This is something very important. If we do not help Palestinian and also other Arab countries in the region, then we cannot have really, we cannot arrive to solve any problem, political problem in our region. So through economic cooperation, I think we can solve a lot of political dispute and differences. So from this context, Qatar is helping the Palestinian in Gaza, because once we help Palestinian and we give them hope for life, I think we are facilitating the process for the peace in our region. If we do not have this kind of help and cooperation for the Palestinian, it will be very difficult to strike a deal for the peace in the Middle East between Israelis and Palestinian. Let's help the Palestinian people. They are in a situation, humanitarian, very difficult, and I don't think if any one of you visit Gaza or Ramallah, you will see the situation. It is very, very, very difficult. So I think what we are doing is for the sake of the peace in the region. We want to live together, Palestinians and Israelis and the whole Arab countries having a mutual cooperation together. And this is the aim of the foreign policy of Qatar when we help Palestinians in Gaza. We want them to really work hard for the peace. This is our objective. And the second one regarding
Mr. Ambassador, regarding the refugees and
the refugees, how we can solve this problem.
Yes.
I think this problem should be solved within the framework of the whole global negotiation between the Palestinian and Israelis. How the both sides agree, I think but we have to find a solution for the refugees. This is something very important. I don't think we can leave Palestinian refugees in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan and without any solution. But we should look for a solution for this problem. And the third one.
The third one was how long do we have before a two-state solution becomes and the writer characterized it as impossible.
Well, I think this is the only solution visible now. It is to have a two-state solution in our region for the peace, Palestinian and Israel. This is something very important, and we have to work for it, and we give all support for American initiative and Secretary of State Kerry, what he's doing. We are appreciating this thing. I think it's very important, and we have to give all support for the negotiation going on, and hopefully we will see a good result.
These are 5 questions that focus on the same incident, issues, and challenges, but stated a little differently and with a little different nuance in each. How has the recall of ambassadors from Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain from Doha been overblown by the media, if you believe it has been overblown by the media, and why? Related, how is Qatar working to restore its relations with Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain? Related again, is the current situation between Qatar and its Arab Gulf neighbors, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain, removing ambassadors, indicative of a deep or superficial division within the GCC? And how can one tell? Next to the last, what is the reason that led to the tension between Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Bahrain as well? And what is expected of Qatar in order to restore relations to that prior state? And lastly, how would His Excellency characterize Qatar's relationship with Saudi Arabia today in light of last month's or last week's cancellation of the GCC summit with President Obama?
Well, so many issues. Let's say, first of all, we regret, what this latest development with the drawing Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Bahrain, their ambassador from Qatar. We are surprised. I don't think there is a reason for withdrawing an ambassador from a brotherly, friendly neighbor country, which is not posing any threat to any of these countries. It's true there is different views, and we are in Qatar, we are encouraging diversified views. I think it will enrich our region to have these different views. But we could be unified in our common interests, strategy in the region, these things. All the GCC countries are unified. But let's be diversified of different views, because the world's been changed. A lot of things going on in the world. We are not, nobody expects the GCC countries to come with one voice or one idea or one analysis. So we have to live in these things. I think our region needs that. We have to introduce our culture of dialogue, of diversification of views. This is something very important that we have to work for it in the region. Thank you. I have already finished. The question is not difficult. The answer is difficult. So, I think this question is very, very delicate for the whole GCC country. If you look at the public opinion in the GCC now, nobody is happy with this decision. If you don't find a lot of them, they are taking position with Qatar also for promoting dialogue, having all these big projects for the future, for the education, for the young people. We're having a Jazeera. So why we are punished for this thing? You know, once we have all these big projects for the region, 11 university Qatar brought in the region. We created Al Jazeera. We are inviting a big American institution like Brookings and Rand. They are in Doha. We are making Doha like a permanent seminar. Every day there is a conference in Qatar. There is a meeting. There is a dialogue. So why we are punishing a country which are doing these things for the region? This is, we are surprised. We don't know why this. I think we hope this decision is limited. There is no escalation, because if there is escalation, if there is more decision will be taken, the whole area will be affected, not only Qatar. Qatar is part of this region. Anything happen in this region, it will be spread all over in our region. But I think we have confidence in the wisdom of our leaders of GCC. They will think about this thing, they will evaluate. We can live with the diversified views, and this decision was taken for things has nothing to do with our GCC Council. They were talking about Egypt, they were talking about Muslim brothers, but inside of GCC countries, I think we can sit together, we can see what's the problem. We are open to discuss any issue these three countries wants to discuss with us, but not to shut down Al Jazeera. This is something, I don't think anyone of you here want to shut down Al Jazeera. For which reason? If there are some problem with Al Jazeera, they can discuss this thing with Al Jazeera. We cannot close down Brookings Institute in Doha or Rand. This is something impossible. Why? Because if we close it down, we will lose our credibility as a country hosting all these institutions. We have 11 universities. If we close it Rand, then all these 11, they will say, okay, thank you, we are not going to stay in Doha, we will leave. So this kind of thing is very difficult for us to take this decision. But if there is other things to discuss, we are very open, and we think we have to protect our council. GCC Council, it is a great idea. It's a great model in the Arab world, because the social fiber between us is more strong than other part in the Arab world. You know, I am from Qatar. I have family in Saudi Arabia. I have family in Kuwait. I have family in Bahrain. This is impossible. These leaders, if they want to divide these countries, they cannot, because the social fiber is very strong. So we hope that this problem will be limited, and Qatar will continue staying in GCC, will never leave. This is our home. And Qatar did not reciprocate this decision by withdrawing their ambassador from this country. We said, hopefully this problem is limited. It can be solved between us, because we don't see any reason that this decision was taken. This decision will be taken with a country that really posing a threat. You know, if any of students studying freshman political science will tell you that this decision should be taken against a country which have different views. That something is not acceptable. So we hope that we can solve this problem between us. We hope that even our friends encourage everybody to accept the diversification of views in the region. This is very important also. We are ready, we are open to solve any problem within GCC.
Mr. Ambassador, your reference to Qatar being an ongoing daily seminar, holding one, is quite relevant in terms of the image, I believe, that reflects reality and one that you want to project. It's in keeping with what we often say, that we're all enrolled in a university from which there's no possible graduation, only on the best of days and incomplete. And you can see that some of the questions have to do with the region being laced at times with two kinds of oil, turmoil, and the other kind. Regarding the former, please describe your country's relationship with Egypt right now. Because when the Morsi government came to power, Qatar extended it a significant amount of financial support and assistance. And if recent reports are correct, the Sisi government has, if only symbolically, returned a portion of that financial gift as a measure of its displeasure with Qatar's previous support for the Morsi regime. Now, how is that rift or disagreement, misunderstanding, tension being addressed now, if not fully yet resolved?
Well, first of all, let me go back to the previous question about how we evaluate our relation with Saudi Arabia. I think just one part of that question. We think that Saudi Arabia is an important country. The stability of Saudi Arabia is stability for the whole region, and we admit that Saudi Arabia is a big, important country in the Gulf, and important role plays in the Arab and Islamic world, and this is something we have to work with Saudi Arabia for the stability and the peace in our region. Regarding Egypt, I think we explained that Qatar has nothing to do with the Muslim Brothers. Qatar is only for the democratic and political process in Egypt. We look at the situation now. It is an Egyptian internal affair. The Egyptian people has to decide whatever they want, and we wish that all the party concerned, they will solve their problem in a democratic and through dialogue. And when Egypt is strong, the whole Arab world is strong. This is something, a fact for us and for everybody in the region. So we are continuing to help Egypt economically. We always, even when Morsi was changed, Qatar continue helping Egypt. We never stop, and we will continue helping because our help is going to the Egyptian people. This is something very important for us. But what Egyptians now decide in their country through the election, the upcoming election in Egypt, through democratic and election, Qatar will accept these things because this is Egyptian people who decide, not Qatar, because we want Egypt strong. Egypt play the historical role important in the region, because once Egypt is strong, the whole Arab world is strong, and this is something we are working with the Egyptian people to see Egypt play this role.
Two domestic related questions. One, because so much of us have read only rumors and heard anecdotes. How can you explain the context, the background and the perspective of the emir abdicating in favor of first his son Sheikh Jassim, when the emir apparently did not have ailing health, nor did his consort Sheikh Moza. That transition, and then the relatively recent one from Sheikh Jassim to Sheikh Tamim. Could you enlighten everyone on how that happened, why that happened, and what are the implications of that transition? It's unique. It's unprecedented in the region.
Well, we hope that we are creating a model in our region. This is something very important. I think this our constitution gives, the emir. After the emir comes the son, and this is there is a council, which is clarified in our constitution to give for the son that the emir, he thinks he's the one who can lead the country, and this is clarified in our constitution. So there was the emir father. He left. He gave Sheikh Tamim became the new emir. I think this is something we have to encourage, appreciate that changing of power happen in a peaceful way, and for the interest of their country, for the interest of the region, and this kind of changes it is positive, and we want to see this as a model in our region.
The next domestic question is reflective of people's fascination or obsession with current events. And in recent days, part of the narrative in the mainstream media has had to do with Qatar's hosting of the FIFA World Cup in 2022. And related to that, issues pertaining to the so-called labor reform movement in Qatar, or to paraphrase it, Qatar's treatment of migrant workers, expatriate workers, alien workers, foreign labor force, overseas contract workers, third country nationals. Those are all near synonyms for the same phenomenon of the overwhelming majority of Qatar's inhabitants not being Qataris, and by far the overwhelming majority of the country's labor force not being Qataris. So the spotlight is now on Qatar, but it could as easily be on any of the other 6 GCC countries where something similar is part of the reality. Now the searchlight is on Qatar in terms of what is it going to do? What is it doing to satisfy or lessen the natural automatic criticism of the international media of Qatar's labor situation, and especially the treatment of foreign workers? They're being, and this is just quoting or paraphrasing the media, bound, tied, nearly serfs to their employers, as opposed to having greater freedom to move from one job to the next, or be supported by the government instead of by their employer.
Well, first of all, let's clarify this point. Regarding the relation with the laborers, we shouldn't confuse two things: the government and the agency of recruitment and the countries of their origin and other elements like foreign companies, local companies. So we have all these elements part of this this issue. We don't say that we are not responsible as a government. We are responsible to create a proper condition for these laborers who are coming to help us to develop our country. But at the same time, we do not know what's happened to them back home before they got to Qatar. This agency of recruitment, what happened? They dated these labor before they came to get this job. And this job, this original government also, we have to see how they are facilitating these people to come to Qatar. Then when they arrive in Doha, they are coming to work with international companies. They are coming with local companies. Some of them, they are working with the government. But most of them, they are working for the big companies, are constructing all these big projects, infrastructure, and the roads. And so I think our duty is to look what the government of Qatar can do. We are verifying all these contracts, which is between them and between the government. We are checking on their condition of work. We are checking in the housing. We are checking in their salary, if they get their salary in time or not. We doubled our inspectors. We introduced now reforms recently. One deputy of the European Union, he announced, he was in Doha, and he said there is improvement in the labor in Qatar. There is some reforms being introduced. We know that to be hosting a World Cup, usually you are having all these critics, coming everywhere. But we think it's helping us to develop our country, these critics, and to change some reforms. What we are doing for helping the laborers, Qatar is giving quota for each country in the region, in Africa and Asia, to let some of their laborers to come to work in Qatar. So this is something I think you don't find a lot of countries doing these things, helping people to come to work. We have agreements, bilateral agreements with these countries. We are doing this thing just to like an economic aid. If we have one labor is coming to work, he's helping behind him 10 people back home. So this is something very important. And you know how much money being transferred every year from Qatar to this country through these labors? More than $13 billion going out from Qatar to help these families who are coming, their sons or their fathers coming to work in Qatar. So we have to look at this aspect. The other aspect for the condition of work, I think we can work together. We need also to work, coordinate with the companies, international companies, local companies, recruitment agency, and the government of these countries, the origin, who send their laborers to work in Qatar. So we announced a list of reforms recently that we are going to change a lot of condition of labor. So I think we are taking the right way to see these people who are coming to help us to respect them, to appreciate what they are doing, and our culture, our religion do not accept you are bringing people and you are not treating them well. This is something nobody accepts this culturally, and according to our religion, this is something it's impossible.
It goes without saying, Your Excellency, that no country on this particular issue of Harriet treats those who are not citizens but who labor, toil in their economies and societies. No country is bereft of blemish on this front, my own included. or devoid of defect. But you were mentioning companies several times here. So if we can switch the focus a bit to the opportunities for which American private sector corporations are particularly well suited and how they're doing, especially given that America for nearly 40 years now has 3 pieces of legislation that no other country has that make it difficult for the American private sector to invest and work and have employees in another country, namely the anti-Arab boycott legislation, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, 1976. First one was 1975. And the amendment to the Tax Reform Act of 1978, which, from the point of view of foreign or expatriate American workers abroad, penalizes Americans for working abroad, where no other country in the world does that. And it gives France, Germany, Japan, China, Italy, Great Britain, Canada advantages that America cannot blame on others. This is a self-inflicted wound. So how is the United States doing in the private sector relationship with Qatar in terms of trade, investment, technology, cooperation, weight standards measurements, and joint commercial ventures?
Well, I think the biggest partner for us in economic field is American companies. Like we have ExxonMobil, we have Occidental, we have other big companies, Boeing. So this I don't think there is any problem with American companies to come to invest in Qatar. We are respecting all the international standard and the contract, and I don't think there is any difficulties to really have American companies to work. We are trying to also to see everybody working in Qatar, Europeans, Americans, and other countries to come to work and invest in Qatar. And our rules, our incentive for investment is known to a lot of American companies. They are all the time, there is a big meeting in Doha, and we are trying here also in Washington in the United States to meet with everybody, to send a delegation. And with us here is Patrick Thieris. He's the Qatar-US Business Council. He's doing a lot to see this cooperation is getting stronger and stronger. And but we assure you that we are respecting the international standard in all economic cooperation, and American companies can come sometime and invest 100% in certain fields, certain areas like tourism, education, health. These areas are open to all American investment to invest 100%. So I think we are giving a lot of incentive for and then taxes and in giving facilities also for getting all what their big project for them in Doha. So I think they are more than welcome. I don't see any difficulties, any hurdles in front of American companies to come to invest in Qatar.
It used to be a consensus in this city that $1 billion of extra American exports abroad translated into, the high figure was 12,000 American jobs. I don't think it's that great, but let's just say half that, 6,000 American jobs, and if the American primary jobs, and if American families are still an average of 4, you can see what we're talking about in terms of tens of thousands of jobs generated. And just in the last few days, a $23 billion contract was awarded to American firms having to do with the country's missile defense. And the ambassador was quite correct in calling attention to Ambassador Patrick Theros and the Qatar-US Business Council. Some of you who may be here out of curiosity are wondering what the business climate for opportunities to do commerce in Qatar might be. You might want to speak with Ambassador Theros. If you just raise your hand, Patrick, he's right here in the second row afterwards. And if there's someone here from the Qatar Foundation having to do with human resource development and educational exchange, that too would invite a dialogue.
And I just wanted to add, would the representatives from Qatar Foundation International just stand and be recognized? Thank you for coming. And I know that there's somebody here from the White House. If she's still here, would you stand and be recognized?
We are happy to have women. Yeah.
And they're all wonderful women that are doing just a great job. And I'd like to welcome our person from the White House here. Thank you for coming and joining us. Dr. Anthony, sorry.
No, just a point on this. I don't think it's appreciated what Qatar has done in this educational field. I remember in the late 1990s when Her Highness Sheikh Moza came to the United States for around 6 weeks and went all around the United States looking for blue ribbon American universities that might wish to partner with Qatar. The story I'm told of her visit to Harvard to establish a branch in Qatar was reacted to negatively, but politely and diplomatically by saying, "Lady, we can't even establish a branch across town." So the idea of having one in Qatar is just a non-idea. Harvard grew to regret that and tried to make up for the loss by having something in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. But I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and the first university to have that exchange was Virginia Commonwealth University. I went to night school there a long time ago. But I went to the inauguration of them all. Texas A&M has the 4 or 5 engineering colleges, mechanical, civil, electrical, petroleum, and chemical. Carnegie Mellon has 2, information technology and business administration. And Northwestern, the most recent one, journalism and mass communications. And Cornell has the Wheel School of Medicine. And Georgetown University has diplomacy and foreign relations, School of Foreign Service. And there's several others from Great Britain, as well as Australia and possibly China or France. I'm unaware of those. Now, what this has done has jumped over what used to be fashionable and the consensus of having one's child have a junior year abroad or a semester abroad. We're talking about 4 years in these universities with the same admission standards, same graduation standards, same transcript standards as their home universities. There's no other place, not just in the Arab countries, the Middle East, the Islamic world like that. There's no other place on the planet that's done something like that. And it used to be fashionable to have a Fulbright fellowship or a Rhodes Scholarship. This has jumped over those as well in terms of the length and the breadth and the depth of the substance and the intensity and the extent of this cross-cultural international educational experience. It's not given the credit it's due. This is truly revolutionary in terms of what Qatar has done on the educational front.
Mr. Ambassador, related to the question of education, how do you envision the future of education in Qatar vis-a-vis the United States and vice versa? And many of our students have asked about the possibility of having we know they do the Model United Nations in Doha, but they've lobbied us for a Model Arab League in Doha. So we hope that you could react to that also.
First of all, education for Qatar is a big challenge because we see the future of Qatar is going to be through building a strong educational base in Doha. For this reason that we created Qatar Foundation and City of Education, which is hosting 11 international university, Americans, British, French, Canadian. So this university, they give chance, they created a lot of chances, a lot of opportunities for young people, not only in Qatar, in the whole region. All the students in our region and beyond our region, they came from Pakistan, from India, from Asia, from Africa to study in Qatar. I think through education, we are going to build up the future Qatar. You know, this is our vision. And we think through education that we can fight against terrorism also. We can reduce tension in the region by having hope for young people to see that there is chance for them to work, to study, and to find a job. This is something important for us. And thanks to Qatar Foundation, they created a fund. It's called Celtic. This fund is giving scholarship, this fund for $100 million and open for all Arab students in the region with a good note, good performance to have scholarship and to go to study everywhere they want, in Europe, in America, in Arab countries. And after they graduated, they have job guarantee for these people who got this scholarship. So it's very important that what Qatar is doing in the region. Education for us, it is the future, and we are building our country through this big institution, big universities, and we are helping the region as a whole. We are investing a lot in education. The biggest investment in Qatar is in education. This is something very important for us.
And bringing this to a close, I think one can say that whereas so many previously perceived Qatar as a gas station, not a country, it very much is on the map as a country worth greater in-depth study, and where many perceived it as a mountain of money, it's now additionally perceived, or more fairly and accurately perceived, as the heir of an extraordinarily rich Arab and Islamic culture. In the West, in the United States in particular, people refer to Americans and Westerners and North Americans being the heirs of the Judeo-Christian culture. This is true, but only two-thirds true. We in the West are the heirs of the Judeo-Christian Islamic culture, and far more recently of the Islamic culture, and more extensively of the Islamic culture than most Americans are even beginning to be aware. And we're speaking of a region that's the crucible of culture for the Western world, the cradle of civilization for the Western world, the crossroads of three continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe, some days appearing like the traffic jam of the devout, and adjacent to, part and parcel of, what is no doubt the epicenter of prayer and pilgrimage, of faith and spiritual devotion for fully a quarter of humanity. We began this seminar with the focus on Qatar understood and Qatar misunderstood. Qatar, as a result of this, is less misunderstood and much better understood, thanks to His Excellency, the Ambassador. Thank you.